brand new film in 2025. This is exciting. Welcome to those of you who are new. My name is Drew. These videos take a lot of time and effort, so let's make a deal. If you learn something new, please like the video, as it actually makes a big difference, and consider subscribing. This is Phoenix 2, which is Harman's second go at creating a brand new film. And when I say brand new, I actually mean from the ground up, completely new. Most new films that you see are actually rebranded and repackaged Kodak film, but that's not really new. It's not a new creation. And before I dive into the actual review and show you some sample images, I want to give a quick backstory for those of you who don't know. So you're welcome to skip ahead if you just want to see the review and sample images, but stick around if you want to know. But stick around if you want to hear why this matters a lot. So we're talking about something that's a brand new creation from an existing well-established manufacturer. Harman, which you may or may not have heard of, has been making extremely high-quality black and white film for a very long time. And they've actually even become somewhat of a staple in the black and white world. Then, a little over a year ago, they created their first ever attempt at color film. This is a huge deal because going from black and white to color required an absolute reset on everything that they already know. That first launch was named Phoenix, the name representing a much warranted and hopeful resurgence in film photography. And I really admire Harman for doing this. Imagine your whole business model is based on a technology that's getting aged out more and more every year. So then to double down and pour your resources into creating a new product, it's extremely risky, but it's a really big step, especially when 99% of film is actually manufactured by Kodak. They have somewhat of a monopoly on the film manufacturing. There's rumors that even Fujifilm has outsourced their manufacturing to Kodak. Competition is good, and this encourages other manufacturers to see a future in film. So Phoenix was their little prototype, and it was a bit rough, I'm not gonna lie. It was immediately clear that that film was not necessarily a professional level grade. It was extremely contrasty and really struggled in a lot of environments. But it is still exciting that happened at all. Phoenix 2 is their second pass at this, so we will be reviewing how it is today after they've been able to learn some stuff, get some feedback, take another stab at it, and we'll be able to see what has changed or been improved. First off, you'll notice that this is blue, and as a kind of general / fun rule of thumb, sometimes manufacturers like to mimic what the film results will actually get you based on the design and branding of the film. There's a fun film photography hack for you. It's also got a yellow backing, which is kind of interesting. And what's also interesting is when it's developed, you still get this purplish, bluish negative rather than the amber negatives we're used to seeing in color negative. So I develop and scan my own film at home. And in this case, we actually benefit because I'm able to give a more consistent result from these final images. And you can ignore the timestamps. My point and shoot camera is a little haunted and randomly decides that it's 1993. So let's talk about these images. First off, they are still extremely contrasty. And it's a bit overwhelming, honestly. That was a large criticism of Phoenix V1, and that is definitely still the case here. These are in dire need of a second pass of edits, and here is what we would get with some minor adjustments, and really just lifting the shadows is all we're doing here. But even just that makes a really huge difference. The colors are definitely blue, especially in the shadows and more unexposed parts of the image. And anything that is already blue is even more emphasized and punctuated, especially the sky. It looks like a crayon. You can really see that with this very thick vignette around the edges too. The skin tones really struggle here. How this film renders skin, at least from my experience, is not terribly flattering. The skin tones look quite muddy and pale. Let's quickly compare this to some Kodak Gold, and you can kind of see what I mean. The more warm tones rendered on this film tend to be a bit more pale and quite yellowy. This I would consider an improvement. The halation is toned down quite a bit, which I quite like. And for those who aren't familiar, I'm really oversimplifying this, but halation is an effect where the highlights in images kind of get double burned, but just pay attention to the highlights. You can see this kind of halo or reddish glow around those bright parts of the image, and sometimes this effect is desirable, but it can quickly get out of hand and get really distracting sometimes. So I really only like it when it's done tastefully, but here it seems that it's far more tamed down. In fact, it was actually hard to find some examples with that halation, even when shooting in bright, overexposed settings. So I'm happy to report it seems that they've been able to tone it down a bit. Now, grain. I am shocked at how grainy these images are. Like, how in the world am I getting this much grain already in a 200 speed film? That's kind of wild to me because it's so contrasty. And again, contrast is the difference between the intensities of light and dark in your image. So because they're so contrasty, you almost kind of have to pick between the shadows or the highlights or which one you want to prioritize. Almost appears as if all of these images are grossly underexposed, which really leads me to believe that this film probably would have been better as a 50 or 100 ISO film. But I will dive into more of that later. Now for some good news. I did shoot this in 120 as well. This film does perform much better on 120, which is somewhat to be expected. I actually quite like the results that I'm getting. However, I've liked it because it did take a bit of fixing in post. The grain is handled quite better, which is to be expected when we jump from a 35mm format to the much larger 120. I mean, just think about it. If you look at something further away, it's going to look a bit smoother. But I do feel like we get a more favorable impression from the 120 versus the 35. So is this film any good? When it comes to film being good, there are two camps of thought. The first is how true to life can we get? The second are the vibes, which is what I call it's bad in a good way. Nostalgia, vibes, it's just cool. And this film might be exactly what people are looking for, but I would say for most, it's probably not. It's not really true to life. And I've actually seen some impressive results when people kind of use this on purpose with a stylized shoot. I think those kind of eerie skin tones that I was mentioning earlier can actually kind of be a benefit, especially if you're going for this more like ethereal, dreamy kind of look. Sure, but unfortunately, I think this film kind of falls into an awkward, clunky middle ground between those two camps of thought. I think you can pull out a more reasonable, true-to-life result with a lot of tweaking, but in its natural state, it's quirky and awkward, but not quirky and awkward enough to be in a cool way. I think it's quirky and awkward in an inconvenient way. So let me get to my point that I mentioned earlier. I really have to coax this film into giving me what I want. A lot of adjustments to temperature and tint, really dialing back that contrast, lifting the shadows, having to readjust those skin tones. And after all that tweaking, I kind of have to ask myself, why am I really using this film if I have to do this much work to get a usable image out of it? And before you get all angry in the comments, here's my 2 cents. I don't think it's bad to edit your film. Don't let anyone tell you how to make your own art. But if something requires so many changes that it's lost its original character, it then becomes a little misleading to, say #Portra or something, and then people expect to get that same result. It's similar to the ship of Theseus. If you replaced a plank of wood one at a time on a ship until every single original piece was gone, is it still the same ship? That was way more deep than I meant to be on a simple film review. Okay, so how would I fix this? What would I recommend people to do? What would I recommend Harman to do? The easiest and lowest hanging fruit that I would suggest, I would just change the label. I would rate this film at a 50 or 100 ISO instead, because I quite like the look when it's less contrasty and less punchy, and in my opinion, it's a much more flattering result. In its current state, the look is far too punchy and in your face. I think it needs some relief and wiggle room to breathe. You could also pull the film, which I've seen has really great results with both Phoenix 1 and 2. And if you're unfamiliar, pulling is just a term for basically underdeveloping. You're intentionally underbaking the film while in development, which kind of softens the look and creates a less potent result. And again, that was a common criticism of the first version. I think that small adjustment would make a huge improvement already, leaps and bounds above what I'm currently getting. Okay, so should you buy this film? I think if you're open to its quirks, go for it. Because at the very least, you're supporting Harman and telling them that they're on the right path. For myself personally, I tend to favor film that's a bit more true to life, so I don't see myself using this type of film very often. I do think it's a refreshing, fun way to mix it up, but I would rank this closer to the more quirky, fun, experimental films closer to that of Cinestill and Lomography. Kind of more those experimental, quirky, fun to try it out type of film. Probably not something you'd want to do every single day, which I kind of feel bad saying, but again, with these criticisms comes improvement. It's not to say that it's a bad product, it's just not quite what I'm looking for, and it does show a lot of promise because they've already improved a lot of things from their first iteration. Even though most of my impressions have been somewhat negative on this film, do not be mistaken, I'm very happy with what Harman is doing, and I'm really excited to see what they're able to make in the future. I would love to see a more true-to-life film in tandem with these more quirky consumer grade films. So I'm really looking forward to what they have to put out. If you like this video, like it actually makes a difference. Do not forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.